It all started with the wallet. Most people, when they hear the name Paul Frank, they think, oh yeah, the monkey. But before Julius the monkey was an international star, Ryan and his partners were making wallets, purses, and guitar straps in a garage in Huntington Beach. In this episode, we're going to hear about the beginnings of one of the most recognizable brands in the apparel industry.
Hey guys, this is Jessica Watts, and this episode of Sea Life is brought to you by Stark in the OC. Here we share the stories, struggles, and triumphs of CEOs of the brands we all know and love. If you listen to your podcast on iTunes, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating. If you have an Amazon Echo, just say, Alexa, open AnyPod and play the Sea Life podcast.
What's up, everyone? This is another episode of the Sea Life.
Learn from everyone you can. Learn of what your interests are.
Yeah, I was making $3.75 an hour. That's what it looked like.
Being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down.
We know the names, we recognize the brands, but how do CEOs and entrepreneurs build successful companies? That is the story we want to tell. We're here with Ryan Heuser. He's co-founder of Paul Frank, which is a really iconic company. When you talk about Paul Frank, people are like, yeah, the monkey. I love the little monkey. The monkey is everywhere. It's a little bit surreal to be here because it has become a very iconic brand. So anyways, Ryan's also an endurance athlete. He is a founder of several companies and fashion mogul, if we will, if we can go so far. So anyways, Ryan, it's good to have you here, brother.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me today. Pleasure to be here.
So without too much, obviously, I could go and give your sort of brief bio, but it'd be way better to hear it from you. You have an interesting background from kind of how you got into the fashion industry to begin with.
Yeah, so I think the baseline starting point here is probably to have an understanding of we can pick it up sort of upon college graduation where I get my diploma and my pops is at the other end of the podium. He says, congratulations, son. Pats me on the back. You're on your own. You have 3 weeks to get out of the house.
Seriously?
Seriously.
He really said that to you?
He really said that.
Was that expected based on your relationship?
No, well, sort of.
What is he, like a Marine or something? Or
No, he's tough love for sure. And, certainly one of my mentors and someone that I think has shaped, a lot of the good. But certainly there was a lot of that kind of guidance and parental tough love growing
I think that's
up.
an awesome idea. Jack, this is your father. Prepare yourself.
Yeah. So, you're in your cap and gown when he says this to you?
Yeah. Dude, I'm not even off the bottom step.
Wow.
And he's like, yep, you're on your own. You got 3 weeks. Figure it out.
You guys are Southern California people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of born and raised here. And so, I so local, so I graduated Chapman University. And didn't, I think as most, didn't know what I wanted to ultimately do.
What did you graduate in?
So it's a business comm, so
Okay.
it's sort of a general,
Okay.
right? And I knew I loved fashion and I knew I loved music. But what is the application of that? Everyone loves fashion music as far as I'm concerned, right? So how do you make a career out of that? And this is actually what I spent a lot of time.
Did you had an awareness of that when you graduated? I would like to try to find a way to make money in fashion.
Yeah. Well, I actually
or music.
Yeah, I interned at Capitol Records. Little known fact about me back in the day, when the music industry was healthy and
a record company.
Right. Right.
Wow.
But my dad was also like hey man, if you want it, you got to do like the William Morris talent agency, work in the mailroom and go up. And I was into that. That was cool. So I worked, I took a job at Urban Outfitters at the lab here in Orange County just to buy some time. And while I was in there, this is one of those trajectory points that ultimately led to this whole story, which we'll get into. I ran into an old friend, said, hey, I'm working at Massimo, and Moss is opening up a couple stores, and I need a guy. And I said, sure, I'll be there on Monday. I'm out of here. And I don't even know if I went back to pick up my paycheck from Urban. And so I reported to work, and I was literally in the warehouse with a college degree. And I said, okay, that's fine. I made sort of a goal. I said, give yourself 3 months. You got to get inside those doors in 3 months, or you need to go get a real job.
Meaning like outside of fashion?
Yeah. And my pops, again, to his credit, was sort of like, where do you want to work? You're going to do outside sales for one of my buddies that you've been golfing with all these years. I don't even really like golf, to be honest. And I thought, okay, this is going down a path on a life that I don't want to live. I don't want to wear a suit. No one's going to tell me when to shave. I don't like golf. Don't make me do this life. And that was a driver for real,
So you felt as though that was your plan B. And you worked your ass off to avoid that?
Absolutely. It was like the flame under my butt.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so, my father was very entrepreneurial, come to find out. And which was weird, is I don't recall ever us in a time having a conversation about, here's what the entrepreneurial road looks like, son. And which I can look back now, maybe it was a way of him guarding and protecting me and saying, you know what, I know that road. That's a hard road. I don't want that for you, And or, hey, I've done all this so that you don't have to.
There was never that, you're saying?
We never had that conversation, no. And so again, going back to my my passion for music and fashion and whatnot, he never said, hey, you should pursue that. Why don't, what is it exactly that you love about those disciplines, and how do we get you engaged in that? And that's not an attack or anything like that. It's just, again, I think maybe he was trying to protect me and just didn't know how to communicate it. So
you're in the warehouse at Massimo, and you got 3 months to get inside.
Yeah.
So what's that look like?
Well, so I was making $3.75 an hour. That's what it looked like.
Wow.
And I was busting my butt, sweating in the warehouse.
Where was the warehouse?
So it was in Irvine.
Oh, okay.
Off Barranca, the first one. Then he moved to Sand Canyon. Yeah. So the one thing I figured out was every day at 10 o'clock, there was a coffee truck that came out. And Moss, being a charismatic, super warm and friendly, well, that's being generous, most of the time, he would come out and he would hang with his staff. And so I would go to this coffee truck hoping to get noticed. And I was buying bagels and coffee that I couldn't even, it would cost me an hour's worth of work.
Half the day's work to buy a coffee and bagel.
So, and I just would stand on the line and I'd turn around. Is he looking at me? Is he looking at me? And one day he called me over and he's like, hey kid, what's your name? And we started talking. He said, well, what do you want to do for me? And I said, well, I want to either be in your marketing department or on your design team. And then, okay, cool, whatever.
Wait, was it normal to have people start in like a warehouse position with hopes of moving into a position that's more fashion oriented?
So he was a bit unorthodox, and I think to his credit. So I remember, like, on one of my first days, I met like his Southern California sales rep. This guy's nickname was Fuzzy, and he's like this, a great dude, and was already making six figures. And I'm pretty sure that he didn't complete a formal education. And I remember thinking, like, what was I doing? Like, this guy's clocking. I'm 21. I've been busting my butt. I'm starting at the bottom. And what? That doesn't seem right. But so Moss was, willing to take chances on guys and give people opportunities, lots of rope, and see what happens. So 3 months, I get the nod. I move inside. I had a position for a brief period that was really not suited for me. I was some sort of inventory control manager, which was just me with spreadsheets is like the worst thing ever. And I was a total failure. And honestly, again, to their credit, they should have cut bait right there. Just, you're done. You don't have it. And wrong seat. And they, Moss said, hey, I'm putting you in the marketing department. And I think
just randomly he did that?
Well, he knew I wanted to be there. So he knew I was,
because of that conversation.
Yeah. But still, again, I wasn't impressive in that first role. And that's just the truth. So I get in the marketing department, and there's a brilliant marketing guy that's the marketing head. Photographic memory, going 100 miles an hour, slept like 2 hours a day. So he was like my first real boss, and he was a maniac, and he was brilliant. And it was like I loved everything about being at work and just soaking up everything the guy said. And so I have him, and I have Moss. So by the way, I'm doing a PR position, just so they put me in charge of, they called it men's public relations. And it was a very interesting time at the company as it was forming. As my role was forming, they began to groom to go public. So I was working with a press relation firm, an investor relations firm, an entertainment and media marketing firm, and running the communication between the departments and running up ideas and things to Moss and to the marketing head. Insane. Like I was the full Bud Fox, Gordon Gekko thing, 21 years old, with not power, but connection and access.
Uh-huh.
And so Moss goes public. And so
Well, that's really an amazing time.
it was such an exciting time, and everyone's young, and there's a great energy in the office. And one of the things too, it's kind of funny on an office dynamics note that I always remember that was an influence later at Paul Frank was, I remember, he was hiring and they were shoving like 3 and 4 people in a cubicle all at one time, and there was this great energy and the communication was flowing. And then once we go public and we moved into like 100,000 square foot office space and had a 200,000 square foot warehouse and distribution facility, the energy left the room. Huh. And there was tons of space between the employees. There was no communication, and it just felt dead. So I always took that. I always liked that tightness and that, hey, it's good to expand. And at some point, yeah, you need to grow your business, but there's a great creative juice and groove you get into, and you got to harness that. And maybe don't push the expansion too quick.
Uh-huh.
So Moss goes public, and then you stick around a while, or?
So yeah, I'm there. It's the heyday. I mean, I'm skipping over a bunch of stuff, but he took me under his wing, and I was really grateful for the opportunity for him to really show me the ropes. And he gave me a taste of what true success was. And, he'd come by my desk and say, hey, Rod, we're flying to New York for Fashion Week, and, we're going to get on the jet. And I mean, again, I'm like, what? Okay, yeah. And I get on, and there's supermodels on the plane, and it's like I'm dreaming. And it's not that I necessarily needed to have that later, but what it did show me was that with hard work, these are the things that can happen. So again, they were never my end game, Uh-huh. But I certainly never really contemplated such things before. And it was a great motivator later on, for sure.
And
it shifted your worldview quite a bit, basically, right?
Absolutely.
And you worked pretty closely with him. Like he was like a mentor to you.
I did. I mean,
so
it
wasn't hard. Like you were just an underling. Like you were pretty close to Moss.
I mean, yes and no. I think certainly, employee level, I was not even in a management position. So I think, I had my role and I knew my role. But on a friendship level, there was a few of us that kind of ran around with him and did things on the social level, which gave me, I think, a little bit of an elevated access. And I think he wanted to, maybe he saw something in me, I've never asked him that question.
So obviously we know that at some point you leave. Is that something, were you happy with the position? Did you want something else? Like what is it that...
So,
was it the expansion? It kind of lost the magic.
So there was a lot happening. So Moss goes public, and I think soon after, it kind of becomes the rise and fall, where his stock value after I don't know how many months or years starts to decline, and they're starting to have the layoff scenario happening. So again, now we're in this beautiful new building, but now people are getting laid off, and there's just kind of this negative vibe that's happening in there. And I actually felt like my days were numbered because my job could be outsourced. It could go to an outside agency, or it could get absorbed by someone there. And now, in fairness to that comment, I had already, the Paul Frank business and the roots of that business were already up and going. So the jumping off point and really the sort of defining moment, I think, of my career and perhaps my life trajectory was we had went to a trade show again. So I'm working the front of the booth for Massimo, who's got, a 40 by 100, and upstairs in a little humble 10 by 10 is John, Paul, and myself. And so in between my breaks, working the front of Massimo, I'm sprinting across the trade show floor, up the escalator, down the hall, to those guys out of breath. Hey, who do we see? I'm sending all the Massimo accounts there. Hey, I know after you see this, go check out my new little thing I'm doing up there. Probably not the most ethical thing, but, only the top doors, only the top accounts I was sending up to.
Gotcha. So you had a kind of already started the Paul Frank thing, but we're kind of moonlighting it until a certain point, and then you're like, hey, this is where I want to go with it.
Yeah, and we'll do the backstory on that part too. And I'll skip ahead, but just so you can get a sense of the jumping off at Massimo was, we ended up doing really well at that particular trade show. So well, in fact, it gave me the confidence. And that very next week, I walked into Massimo's office. I'd written him a really nice letter and said, "I'm leaving to go do what you did," and gave him a hug. And I certainly it was a very emotional moment for me, because here's someone that for the last close to 4 years had invested in me and shown me the way. And now I was kind of leaving the nest and kind of doing that thing. And I was scared to death. By now I was making decent money, and I had crazy, crazy contacts. And one of my jobs was taking all the pro athletes and all the celebrities and rock stars and again, he trusted me to communicate the brand message to all those people and to be the face of his brand when people came in to see him for the tours and stuff. So super cool role. Now I took all of that with me.
Yeah.
I knew all the accounts. I knew all the sales reps. So everything funneled through the marketing part. Everyone wanted free stuff, right? I was the gatekeeper of the free stuff. So anyway, I left and
So let's rewind a little bit, because you meet Paul. Your connection to Paul is kind of interesting. The way you guys got connected and decided to start doing things. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So to frame this in a little bit, I graduated college in 1994. I met Paul during the college years. I would take study breaks at downtown Huntington on Main Street there before it was kind of all built up. And there was a newspaper stand there. And there was this very eccentric guy who worked at the newspaper stand. And I was into thrift shopping back in the day and wearing vintage clothes, used clothing, basically. I couldn't really afford anything else, so I did my best. And one day I was wearing some vintage jeans, and this guy was like, "Oh, yeah, well, you red salvage jeans." I was like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And we started this conversation, and it's totally awkward. And then it even got more awkward when he said, "Hey, can I make you a wallet?" And I thought,
that's a little bit weird.
That's a little weird.
Hey, my saying, right? It's only weird if you both think it's weird. Like, no, I make all my friends wallets.
Yeah. It turns out, it was a very genuine and endearing gesture, and something that he would do if he had a liking to you, or So he said, so he comes back with this shoebox full of scrap vinyl and snaps and thread colors. He said, "Pick everything out, come back in a week, and I'll have it for you." And I said, "Okay." I'm totally intrigued at this point. Like, what is this thing going to be? Is it a train wreck? I don't know. So I came back the next week, and sure enough, he's like, "Hey, hold on, I got your wallet." And comes back, and he hands me this wallet, and it's good. It's a little rough, but it's also... it's well done. Like the stitching, the detail on the stitching was very well done. And I just was sort of taken aback by the idea of like, who knows how to sew? Like, I don't know anyone knows how to sew. And who takes the time to make someone a wallet of their own time? And then I went to pay him, and he said, "Oh, no, I made this for you because you're my friend." And I thought, wow, it just was one of those moments. And from then on, I was always like, I need to kind of just stick around this guy and just see what happens, because that was a freaky thing. And we started to have coffee more and more. And so now as we're forwarding, I'm working at Massimo during this time. I've graduated, and now I'm working at Massimo, and Paul and I are meeting. We're having coffee, and he starts to show me more and more things. And he's starting to make things around and selling them around town. One-offs, literally just one purse, one backpack, one wallet, one guitar strap for this band. And we're having coffee one day, and he pulls this particular purse out, and it's fantastic. And he's like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, I don't know. It's a purse."
How did you know that was a fantastic purse at that particular point in time?
Because it showed knowledge of pattern. Like it was 3-dimensional.
Because you're in the fashion industry at this point,
Yeah.
right? So you're starting to cultivate an eye for this sort of thing.
And how long were you in the fashion industry at this particular point?
Only maybe like a year and a half.
Okay.
So not very long, but long enough to see some things and hear some things. And he said, "Oh, I made it for my girlfriend to match her dress." And I thought, that's so cool. And we just had the light bulb moment. I turned to him and just said, we should start a company. Like, we need to do something together. Let's start a company. I don't know what that means. I'm working at this massive company that's on fire. I'd have no ability to get it anywhere. Like, how do you do that? I don't know. I'm just a guy in marketing, but I just turned to him and said, let's figure it out. Let's move your stuff into so now I'm living, I graduated and I was living at downtown Huntington, 15th and Orange. The typical drug dealer next door, dude with a pit bull on the other side, like hard HB. And I had a garage, a little carport with nothing in it, little enclosure with nothing in it. And I said, well, move your table and move your sewing machine into my space and let's do it. So he's like, okay, cool. And so he's making one-offs. And now as he's making things after work from Massimo, I'm going around, I'm selling him. If he made 6 of something, I'm walking into Huntington Surf and Sport, these local shops, and saying, "Oh, I'd like to talk to your buyer," and here I am with this stuff. And by the way, you can't do that. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
In the mid-'90s, I guess, but that's just not how you sell product into a store. I didn't know any better, and everyone actually, every time I brought the product in, all the salespeople they'd flip out. Like, this is so cool. I've never seen anything like this. And I still don't know that we have anything at all. And but what's quietly happening, unbeknownst to us, is that there's this pent-up demand that starts happening around Huntington Beach in this sort of the greater Orange County area, which is like, if you know these guys, maybe they'll make you something, or but you have to know them. And that was nothing we were cultivating. And in our business, we call it's the scarcity model, right? So it's this idea of having this limited demand and the opposite, having limited supply and this pent up demand. So this was a real thing that was happening. So by the time we go to our first trade show and pop this thing, it immediately explodes, and it goes so good, in fact, that we booked $500,000 in orders at the first trade show.
Was that the trade show where you were running back and forth?
Yeah.
Wow, that is crazy.
And beyond that, it was
that's part of the reason you felt confident
for sure
with leaving, is because you're like, hey, we have people that want to buy this thing we're making.
Yeah, and this is back in the day. Again, the industry's completely shifted. This is when accounts would write an order. They would leave you what we call leave paper. They'd leave an order with you, and you don't do that. That's not how it works anymore either. And so we literally had paper in hand, $500,000. So the next hurdle for us was, so we were elated. We're like, wow, okay, look,
now you have to deliver, right?
Well, you got to deliver. You got to pay for it, right? So
yeah.
we're like, who's got $250K? We need half this to pay, for the production. So I went to my dad and I said, and he'd been kind of seeing, he made some comments.
How many products did you have at that particular point in time?
So really just a wallet collection, so several different styles of wallets, a couple backpacks, a couple handbags, some T-shirts, and some guitar straps.
Guitar straps?
Yeah, Paul is a great guitar player.
Huh.
And so he'd make himself...
So like a passion project. He's like, I love this. This is what I want.
Yeah, and then he'd make them for his band, and then, they'd do their they do a show and they play with 4 other local bands. So yeah, he was super into the music scene, which was great too, because you got those guys out there rocking our straps on stage, and people are like, well, totally unique. So I went to my dad to see if he'd help finance it, and he's like, well, first of all, you have a job, and you have a great job, and I think that you might want to consider staying there. We don't, you're going from Massimo to a guy who made you a wallet that works at a newspaper stand. And I was like, and he said it a lot more colorful than that. And I, okay, that's true. That's a truth pill for sure. But again, as I was saying earlier, there was a drive and something in me that knew this was the right lane for me to be in. And I wanted to do it. And so I jumped at that point. And as to how we were going to pay for it, there was a Japanese businessman who was standing outside of our booth for 3 days witnessing this craziness happening. And he came up to us afterwards and he said, "Here's my card. I want to distribute your product in Japan. In addition to that, if you guys ever need anything, let me know." And there's a lot of glad handling that happens at trade shows. And, hey, call me, I'll hook you up. And it's a lot of BS and fluff. And so as we're going through the orders, John says to me, "Hey, we should call that guy from Japan and ask him for money. We'll give him part of the company, and we'll see if he bites." And so, just to give you basic structure, I mean, what did we know? It was a third. So the dynamic was myself kind of doing the marketing and sales and sort of general outreach and having the most business knowledge at the time. Paul doing pure creative, and John was the business piece, finance. He came from a finance background. It was very entrepreneurial and good with the numbers and whatnot. And he was sitting with Paul and I early on. He was a friend of mine, and he was making some suggestions that I found really beneficial and things that I wasn't thinking about. And so pretty soon, he's sitting at that table with us as this thing's growing. And by the time we get to the trade show, he's already on board as a third partner. So we called the guy from Japan, and sure enough, he's a great guy, and we're friends to this day. And says, "Yeah, I'm in. I'll wire you the $250,000." And I just, again, those things don't happen. No contract. Literally wired it the next day, and we agreed on a percentage.
He just wired the money.
He just wired.
There's no operating agreement. There's
handshake. We gave him 17% of the company.
Wow.
How did you guys?
But hold on.
How did you guys? How arbitrary was because you guys are all kids, right?
Yeah. Well,
and you guys, how did you guys come up with 17%?
So it diluted each of you equally, or
yeah, exactly. So
okay.
Dude, I don't think the word valuation, I don't even know what that meant. So,
17 sounds good.
Yeah.
250,000 should equate to about 7 by my calculations.
Yeah, right. So, several years later, we ended up buying him back out of the 17%, which made us essentially whole again as third partners. And I feel good. He made good on his investment.
Do you mind if I ask what you bought him out at in the future?
Dude, I honestly don't remember. He probably, for sure doubled his money in a couple of years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was probably super happy, huh?
Yeah. And he distributed the brand and he was doing well there as well with it. So,
this could be like a 2.5 hour interview because all this stuff is awesome, but for sure there was some. So let's kind of fast forward into you guys are growing because one of the things that I think is interesting is you guys had for now is more commonplace, but back then you guys had a really unique culture at Paul Frank. So talk to me a little bit about how you guys called. So you guys are the trajectory from that first trade show is upward, right? You guys start growing, things are going well, and you guys create this culture where like everyone's rocking mohawks and
yeah,
really,
oh yeah. You had a bit. If you
did you have a mohawk?
Yeah, I did. Before I went bald, I did. If you walked into our office and you had a mohawk as to opposed to being clean cut, you had a better shot of getting hired with a mohawk and full sleeve tattoos for sure.
Which is funny because that type of culture seems more commonplace nowadays, but back then that must have been so countercultural.
Yeah, for sure. So
now Paul sounds like a pretty eccentric guy.
Yeah.
And you were really into fashion and the music scene and all this. So was the culture kind of just an outflowing of your interests, or how did you guys cultivate that? Was it intentional?
I think that's a good question. I think the culture was established. It was a reflection of my sensibility and Paul's sensibilities, certainly. The fact of the matter is, we were lightning in a bottle from that first trade show. And, we made money the first year. And so literally, if you were a friend of mine and you had a pulse, I hired you. I mean, my buddy that was valet parking cars at the Four Seasons, I'm like, dude, you're pretty smart. You need to come in and you can do production. And you're a handsome guy.
Wow.
You should be in my marketing department. And, and I mean, that is true. All those things are true. At the same time, we're coming up, you have, great brands like Quicksilver and Volcom and doing their thing and they're local. And people wanted to be part of our energy and what we were doing. And those companies were already huge. And I think there was a bit of a disenchanted culture that was starting to seed itself there because those brands were starting to get very corporate. And so we ended up getting the byproduct of that. You had all these great kids, talented kids that wanted to come on board in this frontier brand, right? This totally irreverent punk rock brand. And so we were able to grab a lot of that youth culture that did have the brand experience and the industry experience with us. So yeah, that's kind of how it was formed. And everyone hung out. Like I hung out with the employees all hung out. People were dating, probably not the best idea. It was happening. Again, what do I know about management? I don't know anything about management. I was never a manager. I've been managed. And so, until the HR person gets hired, then you learn about that kind of stuff. But so that, we always had live music. We set up a band room in our office, and when bands were touring when they were coming down the West Coast, we had some pretty connected guys in our marketing team who were very involved in music. We would go in there, we'd have the guys from, Bad Religion would come in. God, I'm blanking. There was tons and tons of bands that would come in. Not necessarily Bad Religion would practice, but I played drums, so I'd get in there and get to jam with those guys and just had the biggest smile on my face ever. But everyone would stop what they were doing when band guys were in there, and there'd just be a total breakout jam session. So, and there was dogs around the office. Not in the back. Roaming. But it was cool. Maybe 8 dogs, a lot, so yeah.
So Julius, the monkey,
Yeah.
was not always part. He came later, right?
Oh, I didn't know the monkey had a name.
Yeah, Julius. So
tell me about how. Because Julius, everyone equates Paul Frank with Julius, right? So exactly, because you think Paul Frank the monkey, but tell me about the Julius thing.
He looks like a Julius.
He does, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's, he's the central figure to this whole story. So one night in the garage back in the Huntington days, Paul walks in and that same purse that he had shown me several months back, he had cut out of vinyl, this monkey face out of these, symmetrical shapes and sewn them down. He put it on a purse and he's like, "Hey, what do you think? I just came up with this character." And I was like, "What? I don't know. What?" It looked like a kindergartner did it,
Yeah.
And which is obviously part of its charm. But at the same time, I didn't get it. It was like, I don't get it, dude. Who's going to want that? And
So it was on a purse?
Yeah, he put it. The first time I saw it was on a purse, and then he quickly, totally ignored my slam job on that and put it on a wallet, and the magic started to happen in a big way. And come prior design meetings, we'd sit there and he'd talk to me about, "Hey, I'm kind of got this theory and this theory," and whether I thought I was in agreement or not, he'd be like, "Remember, you didn't think Julius was any good either," and I'd say, "Okay, you got me on that one."
yeah, that's his.
Yeah.
That was his hammer for the rest of your relationship.
Game set. I got nothing on that. Yeah. So no, I didn't see it. I didn't see it, and that's okay. What I did know was that once we had something, so special, it needed to be guarded and cultivated and positioned relentlessly. And so I think if there's any contribution I had to the success of Julius, it was we didn't allow a lot of access. So I spent more time saying no than I said yes. And so I think the end result of a perfectly drawn character on Paul's behalf and me guarding this thing and cultivating this thing and how we positioned it from a marketing standpoint and the bands we put it on, the people that were wearing it and the people that were associated with the brand is what led to the longevity of the brand and created the cachet for the long-term play, which allowed us to go into several product extensions and really kind of get the name out there. So
let's fast forward a little bit because before the point, because you eventually got acquired by Saban Brands, right? Saban Brands, Saban Brands, which is the Haim Saban is the guy who owns Power Rangers.
Oh, okay.
And so it obviously wasn't a straight line. There was a point at which you guys went through a really tough patch, and Moss came back into your life, right?
Yeah.
So can we kind of fast forward to let's skip over the good years.
Yeah.
And let's get to the rough patch.
Sure. So Moss and I have a very intertwined history where once we started the company, my dad suggested we form a board. I called him. It was my first call. He says, "Yes, I'll be your board member." He comes on. Soon after that, he realizes he wants to buy the company. So he has to resign off the board. We say no because I was still a pup and the business was on a trajectory and there was like, what else was I going to do? We were loving what we were doing. So he resigns off the board. We still were cool. So as a result of the partnership dispute between Paul and John and myself, Paul had left the company, I think around 2005. We were actually in a position to replace that role. So once again, I called Moss and I said, "Hey, you wanted to buy this thing a few years ago. Now's your chance. Come in and be our partner." And he said, didn't say yes right away, but we went and pitched him, and he agreed. So now the three partners are Moss, John, and myself. And so now you've also got the economic downturn starting to happen. You've got years where the brand went from rocket ship, uncontrollable growth, to now there's a partnership dispute. There's negative press out there. There's damage control I'm doing, and the business loses money, and then loses money the next year, and then we're slipping. So we had deviated focus from the core business as a result of that lawsuit for sure, but just general retail confidence was waning too, and we were in a spot. And Massimo says, "Okay, well, I'm on board now, and I have a plan. And we are going to change the business model from a wholesale model." And so we were straight vertical, too. So we had Paul Frank stores. There was 6 Paul Frank stores in the U.S., and we owned several of those. A couple were licensed. And then abroad, we had 30 freestanding brick-and-mortar retail stores. So decent amount, a robust retail division. Right. We sold in 65 countries at the time. We had 125 employees around this time. So pretty good size operation. Something I never thought that I would see. We never made a business plan. We never, how do we get there? It just happened. So the bad years. Yeah. So how do we flip the script? So Moss says, "Okay, it's going to be tough, but we're gonna become a Disney and a Sanrio model, which is a licensing based model. And what that means is you stop manufacturing. Well, at least we did. You can do a partial, of course. We only had about 8 licensees at the time, so we were doing like watches. Were very specialized types of things, bicycles, bedding, things that we didn't feel were in our wheelhouse to manufacture. So we had some licensees existing. In the year 2009, we proceeded to lay off 100 of the 125 people. And
wow, that's rough.
Yeah, it was super heavy. We would call whole departments in, knowing that only one of them, because the development calendar of a company is on a calendar year, certain departments would be immediately affected, and some would go all the way to the end to the guys that are shipping the product out the end of the door. So if you're a department of 10, maybe we'd keep 1, maybe we keep 2, and again, I just said these were all my friends, and it was it's a difficult. Difficult doesn't even. That word doesn't even work. Soul stealing and just super depressed, and it's. You hear like those rock stars, and I'm not comparing myself to a rock star, but when they say there's lonely places, I think I can relate on some level to that, in knowing what that empty space feels like. So. We successfully, on the positive, transition, and we end up, that year we let all those great talented people go, who had been in the trenches with, and we had our retention was insane. Like no one left the company, everyone was lifers there. People had Paul Frank tattoos. Imagine that. You got a Paul Frank tattoo, and now I'm going to call you in the room, and we're going to terminate. It's terrible. So. We successfully transitioned that model. We go on to sign up 110 licensees. So now we're actually generating cash because we've got advances and guarantees against future royalties and such. So Moss, once again, pulls a rabbit out. Company's now completely turned around. We're making money. We had now opened up the closely guarded brand, and we now went mass. So we're selling Target, Penny's, Kohl's, Sears. That wasn't a decision that I was necessarily good with. It's not something I ever wanted as an end game for the business. I always felt like when I handed someone my business card, I wanted it to mean something. I wanted them to look down at that and go, wow, that's you. Okay. And now I felt like maybe the brand became something else.
So when you moved from the manufacturing model to the licensing model, was that sort of like the beginning of the end for you?
For me personally, yeah. For the brand, no. But for me, I was not being genuine to myself, and I think the intent of everyone there. Yeah. So now we're fast forward to a small office, which is just a design office. Beautiful design studio. I'm overseeing the art department, and it's great. It's super talented bunch. I think half of them are at Disney now, and as they deserve to be. And but I would sit in my office, and I would just look at my computer screen, and I'd glaze over, and I'd say, "What am I doing? What am I doing? What?" And my thought was, if I'm not bringing the energy as a leader, walking out of my office and bringing that leadership and enthusiasm and passion to them, how can I expect anything from them? I can't expect good creativity. I can't expect anything. I really can't. And so that was it. I walked into John's office and I said, I'm done. And I don't want to do this anymore. And he was like, okay, well, I do. So, but he was like, look, man, I don't begrudge you. You go do what you need to do. And let's just see if we can work this out. So yeah, as you mentioned, the end game is we were able to round up the wagons between John Moss and myself and bring Saban, a great company and a very strategic value add partner in terms of their ability in the media space. And so we were able to get a deal done. We were all happy. And So here's how ironic that was. So who gets retained on?
Out of the three of you?
Yeah, me.
Oh, man.
They want me to stay on.
Not the other two.
No. Moss, whatever. Moss has got a dynasty and an empire. He's got a million things. And John had other pursuits. And I also, not to discredit John, he's a brilliant business mind, but I don't think that they have a whole group. They have, Saban's got a team that does finance function. And
I understand.
It just there was no need. And so the one guy who wanted to leave doesn't get to leave. So they retained me for a 3-year deal, and I lasted 18 months, and they were very gracious when I said, look, guys, I think after 18 months, you don't need me. You got this. And so, the brand's gone on to flourish in the Pacific Rim, China. It's massive. I was there with another brand, and was astonished at the amount of Paul Frank that I actually saw on the streets. Like, outnumbered Hello Kitty 10-1 when it was crazy.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, wow. Crazy. Unfortunately, I don't get to enjoy any of that revenue stream that's being derived from that. But so, the brand's living on. They created, media properties and created a show for Nick Jr. It's cool. It's cool to see that.
And do you think, when you have your most honest moments, like, do you think the direction, like where the brand is now, whether moving to the licensing model or selling to Saban brands, like, is that what was best for the brand at the time, or you feel like you let it go in a meaningful way?
I think the brand was going to be successful regardless of my participation in it. It was so far beyond, me trying to push and pull the brand in directions. And the reach was so great. I think it would have, look, from an ego perspective, nah, man, it would have been nothing without me, right? No, I think it would, it as it continues to go on this long journey, would I like to see things return to a little different place with some of the aspects of the brand? Yeah, I would. And I think I could help them get it there, but that's not my fight right now.
Fair enough. Well, that's awesome. What a cool story. And Paul Frank's such an iconic brand. It's just a logo that's recognized all over. It's super cool. What are you up to now?
So certainly, my favorite thing to talk about is my podcast. It's called Brevity Code. It's a selfish play for me. I get to have fun talks and learn from people that interest me greatly. So these are entrepreneurs, these are philanthropists, athletes, coaches at all different levels. So really just sort of taking all the things that really get me out of bed in the morning. The coffee guy, and from Common Room Roasters, great guy. And I love coffee. So let's have him on the show. So that's as much as I, am thinking about who's going to be on my show. It could be, it's random in that sense, but in the spectrum of my interests, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So doing that, and got a few brands that I'm sort of currently in an advisory role that are super fun. 2 of them are tech apps, mobile e-com platforms. One's a real estate play. One's like a curated shopping, social media, news feed, crypto play. It's really interesting. That's a fun one. And the third one is a brewery. I love beer. The other day, there was like a meeting. I got to taste 12 beers. That's what I did. For my day.
That's work for the day.
Hard day of the office.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you're working on the podcast, the Brevity Code, and then advising some of these companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. In all seriousness, I could have done this for like 3 hours. Just so much cool stuff. I have gotten to talk to you, previously about other stuff, and there's so many cool stories that come up over this. But we want to transition to what we call the muzzle load round.
Okay.
It's sort of rapid fire, but not that fast. we just kind of, it's like a medium fire. Like we're going to ask a question and then give you time to answer, kind of muzzle load around.
All right.
So, what have you accomplished in your business you're most proud of?
I think that I was able to, well, myself and my partners, that we were able to cultivate a business where families were able to flourish. People that came to work with us were able to buy homes and start their lives and have children. So I'm very, as a father of 3, looking back at that, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. If you could go back in time, what would you tell the younger version of yourself?
Oh, man. The younger version of myself did it right, man. I'll tell you that. I didn't leave a lot on the table, dude. But I'll tell you this. Here's the crazy thing. That success was fleeting. And so I think on the daily, I was very head down, focused on a lot of times short-term objectives and not picking my head up and looking around at all of the things that we were accomplishing as a company together. And then all of a sudden you wake up and it's gone. It's gone. So
meaning you didn't appreciate it enough at the time? Is that the actual process of it because you were too focused on accomplishing?
I think when you're in it, you think this thing's going to go on forever, and then life happens and things change, and it's pixie dust, man, and it goes away. Yeah,
crazy. So you look back on this and think like it just happened like that.
Yeah,
crazy. What are you reading to, listening to, or subscribed to currently for personal or professional development?
Yeah, kind of random. So I vacillate between books, audiobooks, podcasts, and taking people to lunch that are in my phone. And I'll explain that in a second.
Taking people to lunch what?
Taking people to lunch that are in my phone, like my contacts list. So I listen. I get my education from Joe Rogan. I listen to Joe Rogan every single day, and I think he's fantastic, and he's doing a lot to push a lot of awareness out there on a lot of different topics. Ryan Holiday is great. He writes great books. He also has a thing called The Daily Stoic, and it comes in my email every morning, and it's my little reset when I'm having a cup of coffee. And he's a big
Daily Stoic.
Stoic. He's a big philosophy guy, and he believes. He doesn't believe. He subscribes to the method of the Stoic philosophers, and it's a really great palate cleanse to start your day. Check that out.
Have you read anything about Stoic philosophers prior to listening to the Daily Stoic?
Yeah, I mean, I try. There's Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and I will go back and refer. Seneca's, I think, is called The Shortness of Life, and then Marcus Aurelius is called Meditations, and it was notes he wrote to himself that were never meant to be published, and they're fantastic, and it's I don't know. It's great stuff, and I defer to the expert. I'd go to Ryan Holiday for better clarity on those things. But they talk about things like, sort of the man who takes the view of fretting about every day lives a short life. It's essentially what it is.
So, and then you said is that like an email newsletter? Like
yeah.
You get that? Okay.
Yeah, the Daily Stoic. I just finished Scott Galloway's The Four, which is the book about Facebook, Google, Apple, and what am I leaving out? Amazon. Jesus. Oh. Yeah. Great. Crazy. Will scare you, and at the same time, you'll want to buy stock.
That's awesome. And so what's the taking people out to lunch thing?
Oh, yeah. So, we go through our lives and we meet people. Oh, yeah, you're cool. Great. It's cool. And you're on to the next. And I'll go back through and I'll look at my contacts and I'll say, wow, that's a really inspiring man or woman. And again, it could be an entrepreneur I respect, or it could be a thought leader, whatever those things are. And I'll literally just text them or call them and say, hey, we haven't connected in 2 years. I'd love to just get together with you and have a little face to face. And they're, sometimes they're friends and it's cool. Sometimes it's like, what is this about? And I'm like, no, I don't have an agenda. I just respect you and I just want to hear your story. I just want to hear your story. How did you get to where you are? And it's just a cool, I feel like we all have that. Like we all have people in our phone we want to talk to more, or people that they may have said something one time in passing and you never have forgotten it.
Yeah.
It's like it reminds me of the book by Keith Ferrazzi, Never Eat Alone. You read that book? It's all about that. Like just any meal is like an opportunity to connect and to learn and to grow and meet people. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Last one. What habits, routines do you have that you use to stay on top of your game?
Yeah. So a couple things. I try to meditate. I'm super bad at it. I try to.
You're bad at doing it. Like you're bad at the act of meditating, or you're bad at incorporating it into your routine.
All the above. I'm bad. So no, I really do try to have a more of a disciplined day. Starting off, waking up, reading a bit, and then trying to meditate. But again, I also have 3 little kids, and sometimes that just doesn't happen. And a dog now. It just doesn't.
Is it one of the 8 that used to roam?
No,
in the warehouse?
My little guy passed away. We have a
sorry
new
to
one.
hear
Yeah, it's okay.
What type of meditation are you talking about?
Mindfulness meditation. So that's how if this is the perfect day, it's waking up, reading a bit, doing a bit of meditation, having my coffee before the house wakes up. And certainly I don't let a day go by without some sort of physical fitness. And then I really try to practice keeping all my buckets balanced. So family, friends, selfish goals, spouse, they all need equal footing, in my opinion, equal attention. And then lastly, I do this thing I call the everything list. And I'm 45 now, and I'm a bit more forgetful than I was. So literally, I have an ongoing email that I write to myself once a week, and I send it, and then I forward it again and again and again. And in it, it could be vision. So it could be something as simple as, here's my housekeeping things I need to do this week. Fix that window, tighten that screw down, right? Those are those little things. But then it could be something more meaningful, like, find a new book, go to lunch with my mom, like those things. And then it's, I've got top line notes on each of the companies that I'm working on. And then I've got a scrolling thing of, these are my future podcast guests that I'm trying to get on the show. And so it's this rolling, it's a blurb. It's maybe a couple of words. So I don't make this big, long, bogged down thing, but I look at it every day as a snapshot. It really helps me frame my day. It's a visual that's right in front of me.
You do that once a week?
I write in it every day.
Oh, you write in it every day?
I send it to myself once a week.
Oh, gotcha. So you keep a draft in your inbox?
Exactly.
And then you send it once a week?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. The everything list. Cool. Yeah. Ryan, this is awesome. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much for joining us in the Love Sacks.
Yeah, the Love Sacks. We're hanging out. For everyone listening, check out the Brevity Code. Very, very cool because of the diversity. I listen to the Brevity Code, very diverse set of guests. So the odds of finding something or someone that you latch on to, like the one that you did with the lady from Skip One, awesome. Yeah. Like I said, coffee, athletes, the whole thing. So check out the Brevity Code. Thanks. This is awesome.
Guys, thanks for having me. This was super fun. I hope I didn't clog your airways too much.
No, it's very cool. It's just like, a lot of people see the monkey and they don't know like everything that was behind that.
Now they know about the monkey.
Now they know about the monkey.
Julius.
There was a lot to that monkey.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Today's episode was produced by the talented Jessica Watts. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Also, for more content, follow us on Instagram @SeaLifePodcast or check out our Facebook page, The Sea Life. And last but not least, if you're into health and fitness, be sure and check out our other podcast, Stark Naked Radio.